Well, today we're going to do a quick program on grooming our African violets. We have Lone Star coming up in October, so we should already be having our plants picked out and decided on which ones we're going to take to show. So today, Summer has brought me a couple of semi-miniatures and a standard, and I will say that it doesn't matter which one you're looking at, whether you're looking at the semi-miniature or the standard, your grooming principles are going to be the same way for each one of them. So the first thing you need to do when you buy your plant is buy a plant that has good symmetry. We see some at Ken's that have this wonderful symmetry, and then we see some at other places like Lowe's or Home Depot, not Office Depot, and they're just kind of blah, they're there. Some of those you can take and you can groom them and you can make them into a wonderful show plant, but many of those will have suckers on them and they're already too far gone to get those groomed and get those in good symmetry and get them cleaned up for a show that's coming up, let's say 6 months. So it doesn't matter which one you're growing. For this talk, we're just going to do these three. It's a little bit different from trailers or something else that we've got going on. So you want to get a plant, like I said, that you know that you can take and you can get a good symmetry on it. And what we do, if you're not aware, it was kind of look at the center of this plant. And if you know anything about African violets, you know this crown starts with leaves of 3. And that's what I normally look at. Do I have 3 good close together leaves? The petioles are not long. They look like that I could move this little leaf around and I could make a good shape out of that, good symmetry. So we've found a good symmetrical plant. We're going to get it ready. We have repotted it into good soil if you don't buy from Ken. Ken always repots his violets that he gets in from outside vendors. If not, if you've picked it up from someone else, maybe at Show or, like I said, Lowe's or Home Depot, those are still in heavy growers potting medium. So the first thing you would want to do is get that out of that potting medium and put them in a nice loose soil to get them growing, and you'll be surprised at how fast they grow. So now we've got our plant selected for show. It can be your semi-miniature, miniature, or standard. And we need to look at it to see, is this plant dirty? Has it got anything on it? And we'll take it and we'll look at it. And so, okay, it looks pretty good today. A good grower, and a lot of these best in show winners that you will see, they pick up their plants, they look at them every day, they touch them every day, they groom them every day, they repot them on a regular schedule. That's part of your grooming process. If you don't repot this plant every 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, you're not going to have a good show plant. So you want to keep them in good soil. You can always tell when they're ready to be repotted. So we can tell this one is a good plant. She's got a good plant here, and symmetry on this one is good. You'll notice that she's got stakes in here. When she picked up this plant at one time, she thought, oh, maybe this leaf is migrating this direction. We've got to move it back to keep that symmetry of 3. Can you see the 3 leaves in the middle? It's going like this. And each one of those plants will come out in between. So this one looks like it was a little rogue leaf. So what we do is we take a dowel. We can take a toothpick, which sometimes gets a little sharp, or a coffee stick stirrer. And what she's doing is she's moving this leaf over gradually to get it back where it needs to be. Now, if I took this out today and I had just done this last week, it would probably migrate back over. So that is one of your grooming tips, is that you want to make sure you keep your symmetry in all your plants. So I will tell you about toothpicks on little ones that I use. Sometimes, I mentioned those were sharp. They will sometimes eat into the petioles. So I have learned over the years that toothpick is not always your friend in trying to move a leaf.
The point of the toothpick too, will, like if it's under another leaf, it'll stab the one that's under.
Puncture it, yeah. So anyway, so see this one, how it's crossing here? We'll need to look at this and see if this leaf needs to be removed in the future, or if this one needs to be moved over just a little bit. Do you see that?
And that's what she's got that stake in there
and
for, I
that's
believe.
the very same thing. Well, it's working on this leaf here, so it looks to me like I would probably put a stir here and kind of move this over for a little bit. So that's where you're going to start with your grooming, is making sure that you've got a good symmetrical plant, that they're growing the way they should, and that you're happy with it. There's no indication that you've got any disease going on in these plants. Okay. The other thing we do on Symmetry is we like to use rings. Now, I use, and Summer uses, these plastic rings that have been around for 100 years. And I use them still because I have a million of them. But I know a lot of people are turning to plastic plates, and they get the same result. If I take this off, I probably won't do it on this one, but this might droop. It's not on this one because she's had it on there long. See that gap right there?
For show purposes, you want the plants, the leaves straight out. You don't want them hanging down. You don't want them growing up. You want them straight out if possible, and that's perfect. If you took that to a show today, that would be great. If your plant's all hung down, that's not the best look in a show.
So on the paper plates, what you can do is you can take the size of your pot, draw a circle in the middle of the paper plate, cut you some little gussets in there. I think that's what you
razor blade and out on some heavy cardboard and cut on the inside. That's the big key.
And
So,
slip this right on. It does the very same purpose as the plastic supports.
One of the reasons that I use the plastic support is it gives me a really quick, I can really quickly eyeball the size of my plant. Because with the different types of plants, the standards versus semis versus miniatures, like you have to keep them within a certain size range. The rubber band on one side
that's what we call a 6-inch leaf support.
Yeah, so I know immediately if my minis are getting too big, if they start overlapping the edge of that miniature ring.
Then when you get to convention, this is one thing. If you're taking a miniature, there will be somebody at classifications that will measure that plant. So you want to make sure when you leave home with it, you're where you're supposed to be. So now we've selected our plant, we've got our ring on it, and it looks really well. So now we're going to concentrate on grooming this plant. Okay, so we need to look and see, are all of our leaves where they're supposed to be? We want to make sure we take off baby leaves that are hidden underneath other leaves. That'll be something that the judges will see. Can you see it? There's a baby leaf under there. That will need to come out.
How do you take it out?
A baby leaf, this, by the way, is the first leaves that were grown on that plant. That's when the plant was a baby. And when it gets to a certain point, it kind of sits there, it doesn't grow anymore, but then the newer leaves come out above that and over it. And I always tell people, you don't ever want to take a baby leaf off if it's needed for symmetry, because you want that perfect round, even if it's a littler leaf, as long as it makes that circle, leave it there, don't take it off, because you'll lose points under symmetry if you have a gap or a space in there. But if it's a baby leaf and it needs to be there, hang on to it for a while. I try to take baby leaves off one of the last things I do, because maybe that's going to fill in a spot. But as you can see on a couple of those there, when you look from the bottom, you're going to see those babies, and those are taking strength from the plant, so you want to get them off.
Right under that. She's got several on this one that needs to come off. So how do we take them off? There's several different ways to take them off. I use tweezers on mine. I've had these for years and they're very, very sharp. They're tweezers that I got at a bead convention one time. And this particular one's good for repotting. You can dip up your soil in here and put it in there. But what I do is I just stick this in here and I can get close to the crown and I can pluck that off because we don't want to leave a lot of petiole in there. That will cause that upper leaf to kind of work its way up.
What is petiole?
It's the stem that holds the leaf to the crown.
The leaf
Is
stem.
it
That's
petiole?
holding the
Yes.
baby leaf.
Right.
So you wanna take that to the petiole?
Yes. Take
You
it as
wanna just
close
take
to
the
the.
leaf part, you wanna take that stem
petiole.
and the leaf.
If not, it's gonna eventually work its way up and you're gonna find that your leaf is gonna be sticking up like so. So that's what I use mostly on my little ones. I used to grow big standards and this is what I use to get leaves and suckers and everything off on my standards. This came from an agricultural peel thing, I think.
And they pull off quite easily.
You kind of sometimes have to manipulate them gently, but yeah, they do come off.
You
And
don't
I,
wanna leave the stub there, you wanna make sure you
Yeah.
clean that off.
Mhm. I also use little tiny thin scissors to groom my plants. If it's any bigger than this, I also have a pair of tiny fingernail scissors that I use. Okay, so you're gonna look at this also for crowns. Make sure there's no crowns underneath here that's distorting your leaves. Does everybody know what a crown is to a plant?
Sucker.
A sucker crown.
Yeah, we
I
call them
it a
suckers.
crown. Sometimes they will grow right next to this crown on top, and before you know it, you'll have this little bitty 3-leaf sticking up here. So you want to make sure you check for crowns, and there's no crowns on these. But if you did have to take a crown off, I use this is very good to get in from the top, and it just digs it off. This is a
Sucker plucker.
sucker plucker.
That's what they call it.
A sucker plucker, but really it's a ceramic tool that they use for cleaning ceramic pieces. So I use this quite a bit if I can't get hold of it. Sometimes it's big enough you can just take your fingernail and kind of flick it off of there. So you're looking for that.
But suckers drain strength from the plant, and when you get down to it, the quicker you get them off there, the better. And if you're careful, sometimes you can take a sucker off and actually root it to make another plant. But your most important thing is to take it off your show plant, your slow prospect, I should say.
Your show prospect. So then we want to make sure it's clean. And like I said, the big growers, they touch their plants and clean their plants every day. I'm not that enthusiastic, and I've never won Best in Show at a convention, so that tells you a lot, but they do. So you're going to look at the plant. Do I have any little specks on it? Do I have any cat hair on it? Everybody has cats, seems like, or dog hair. So you look at this plant, and yes, it does. It has some things that need to be taken care of. After I get these leaves off that don't belong on here, I'm going to take a brush and kind of flick these off here. Now I use a makeup brush, just a cheap, I think this is an e.l.f. makeup brush, and you can usually just lightly touch this and those those specks will come right off. Another thing you can do is you can put these underwater and give them a bath. And I was shocked when I learned that you can do that. See, we've got a cat hair right here, so that needs to come off. And what that does, these things, they clog the pores of these leaves, so they're not getting all of the chlorophyll and the light that they need. So you're going to keep these clean. If you have cats in the house, I will say you almost have to do this every other day.
Or a shedding dog.
Yeah, or a shedding dog, to keep these clean, especially
Or dust.
if they're on the bottom shelf. Now if
So
you-
what are you using? I'm sorry.
This is just an old soft makeup brush.
Okay.
I also have a really old shaving brush of my husband that's got real soft bristles that I will use. That's really good. You don't want to have a brush that's got a real heavy, thick
Bristle.
plume on it.
Bristle.
Bristle, plume, because it sometimes will leave strips in your leaf. They kind of dig in. So you're gonna have to use a real soft bristle brush, whatever is it. And try not to groom this too terribly hard to keep that from grooming. A lot of people take theirs to the sink and wash them. I do not do that because I have the hardest water in the world, and it will pit my leaves every time. But the people that have soft water, they do that quite often, I understand, but they'll take a piece of foil or saran wrap, put it around the soil in the pot, take it to the sink with tepid water. They will tilt their plant and they will let the water run over the leaves. Now you don't want to get the
RO, if it's
RO
reverse
water,
osmosis.
if it's warm enough, yes. You don't want it hot, you don't want it cold.
And you don't want full blast.
Right. You want a nice, soft, gentle stream, and you're gonna keep just turning that plant around under that water until you've cleaned it. And then you're gonna take it and set aside, and you're gonna get some paper towel, and you're gonna blot that water off this leaf. Now, again, I've got hard water. I can't do this. No way, no how. But what I can do is I can take this paintbrush and I can wet it and squeeze the water out, and then I can take it and brush across my leaf, and that helps me get debris off of it or hair off it. But
And water.
Huh?
And water. Yeah.
Yes.
Especially if it's dry.
And the thing you don't want to do is you don't want to leave water sitting on these leaves, because they will hurt the leaf, or at my house they do. I can tell immediately. I end up with this kind of
What is,
from water, my hard water. I can always tell there's water been on my leaves.
Now, there's a lot of controversy, I think, in washing the leaves, whether or not you should use soap.
I
Kent
don't.
Stork, which was one of the most wonderful, he was a florist, and he was very active in AVSA, gave a program, one of the national conventions, about the way he cleaned his leaves, and he took a couple of drops of liquid detergent, put in a quart spray bottle, and had a super fine mist, and he spritzed his plants down and let them sit for just a few minutes with the soap, not very long, but the soapy water. And then he went back, and then he went through the process of washing the plants afterward. And he got spots off of them, like if you had fertilizer water and it left a white spot, or he had some other things from spray residue. That's pretty hard to get off. If you just put it under the sink, as soon as it dries, that spots come back. And that's one of the things he gave the program on, is how he used a little bit of a liquid detergent in water, in a very warm water again, spritzed the plants down, let them sit for a few minutes, and then he took them to the sink, just exactly like Irene said, tilted the plants, let that wash off with air, and then he dried them afterward. He suggested whether you use paper towels or tissues, but I think the little sponge paint brushes are great, and you can actually use the same thing there to clean them with. Put some soapy water in a bowl, dip one of those in there to get the spots off, then take another one that's in plain water and clean that off of there, and then take a dry one and blot off the excess. And I've used that very successfully, because I'm going to have spots on my leaves, I don't have any cats, I don't have any dogs, but I do have water spots on there from fertilizer, because we have a lady that when she spritzes in the tray to fill our trays up with water, sometimes it gets splattered and it leaves water spots, and it's fertilizer in our water, and that's where we get a lot of spots. But that's when I get ready to clean, that's where I'm going to have to clean, is those spots off. And that little foamy brush works really, really good.
Yeah, I use this all the time. But I will tell you a story about not cleaning my plant. My husband used to drive me all over the United States to a convention. And that's when we were traveling in our motorhome. And at this particular time, I had a Sharita that was about this big.
And she grew it big.
Big. And I put it in the shower. It traveled in the shower. So nobody could take a shower. And every stop we made, my mother happened to be with us, and we got that plant out and we put it in the sink and we washed it and we groomed it. And at the time I had a cat that traveled with us and carried that plant wherever we were going. Mother would hold the flashlight and I would groom and I would wash and I would carry on. And got to where we were going to convention. My plant was pristine. I had it ready. I took it to classification, and I'll never forget this in my life. There was a little old lady there, even older than me. And she was looking at my plant and, honey, do you mind if I take this cat hair off of here? So you can never groom enough. That's my motto. You can never groom enough.
And classification in a show is supposed to help you so that they don't go into the showroom and the judges say, this is a dirty plant, and might count off points for that, so.
Okay.
Because of one cat hair?
Because
Oh,
of
yeah.
one cat hair.
1 point for each
So
leaf.
I have,
And it was a big cat.
yeah. We did. We groomed that. My mother was so tired of that plant, she could have thrown it in the trash. Paul couldn't take a shower, so we had to go to the bathhouse to take a shower. So I'm passing around, if you don't know this, the points that they take off when judging this plant that you're looking at. And one of the things they're looking at, we talked about symmetry. They're gonna look at this plant and make sure it's symmetrical. They're gonna make sure there's no baby leaves off under there that they can see. And they're gonna give you 25 points if your plant is symmetrical. If not, they're gonna start taking off. And we have a scale of points that we use when we're judging that plant. So if you have a gap or a space, they can deduct up to 3 points for each one. So there's where you get into leaving your baby leaf on or taking that baby leaf off. If that baby leaf off is really gonna mess up your symmetry, like possibly right here, you would want to leave it on, okay?
And you mean till the last minute?
Yeah,
No,
we're
no,
not talking about,
and-
when I mentioned about baby leaves and symmetry, that means the leaf might be smaller and make sure every leaf touches that same circle. There's very few perfect plants out there. I've seen some perfect ones, but when the baby leaf is there, even, it's not one that's stuck underneath there, that's a true baby that should have come off, period.
Like this.
But if it's sticking out even with the rest of the plants and it's smaller, it's still a baby leaf that they might call it that. But for sure, it's important for the symmetry because it's gonna save you some points.
So they don't count against you?
Not if it's in needing symmetry. If it's a little leaf and some of the plants, when they come to the shows, especially miniatures, they don't leave one layer of leaves. This is one that came from the nursery, of course, and you don't see layers of leaves around the pot because we have a groomer at our nursery, and she doesn't like to have a whole lot of leaves hanging down, so she removes those. That's what you should do so that you end up with pretty symmetry. And symmetry is judged from looking down. You can't tell symmetry from the side, most of the time. But if you look down, that's where you're gonna see symmetry. You're gonna see is that plant round? That's really what symmetry means. And so, but sometimes I see plants in the shows that are really pretty plants, but they've got layers of leaves hanging down that don't need to be there. And it's a whole lot better not to have those hanging down. It's better to remove them off so that you got one layer of leaves. These are groomed really good, so you see them, like I say, when you take the leaf support off, they're flat out there, and that's the way they should be. If there's too many layers, there's still gonna be leaves hanging down, which are not good in the shows.
And if you leave if your plant is dirty, if you've got soil residue that's come up, that's called conditioned, and that's under condition or cultural perfection when the judges are grooming that. And they can deduct up to 1 point under condition, so you wanna make sure that it's nice and clean.
And those are things you can do. Symmetry, you gotta really work on that early on, but when it comes to condition, that's something can be done the night before you take it, you box it up for the show. So those are things, you have the right to change that. Grooming is part of that, but condition is something you can change by cleaning the leaf or removing something that shouldn't be there, or when you've got blooms on the plant and you've got some that are old, that's a bad thing to leave bad old blooms on there, because they're gonna count off points for a bad bloom, and that you can lose points that way. So just because it's got blooms on there, they need to be fresh flowers, and as part of that grooming, you can remove those bad ones. So I always, and when I'm grooming for the last minute before I put them on the show table, the classification table, I want to make sure I get every one of those bad blooms off it, because they're going to sit in the showroom overnight, and sometimes the air conditioning can blow on them, and you can, those ones that are still they're just hanging on by a thread, the next day they're brown, and the judges come along and they judge the plant and say, oh, this person could have cleaned this plant up a whole lot by removing these bad blooms. I'm going to count off points for that. That's condition that you had the right to do something about and should do before you put the plant on the classification table.
And again, you use those little clipper things, tweezers to take those little ones
You
off.
pinch those individual blooms off, just the individual flower that's bad, not the whole thing, unless the whole stem's bad. But some people will say, oh God, I need that flower there because I don't have
You need
enough
the
blooms.
count.
And you're trying to save it, but know that if it goes down and there's no bloom there the next day, it's counting against you rather than helping you.
And I don't pinch my blossoms off. I cut them off with these little scissors.
I use the tweezer and pinch them off, but it's similar to cutting them off,
Yeah,
but you
same
have to
thing.
really have a
But I
sharp
don't take my
tweezer.
finger and pinch
Yeah.
them. And I know Ken has taken these in the past and has ground them down to make them even sharper.
I can't do without
So.
those. And I use
Yeah.
those, I use those every day at the nursery. I take bad blooms off, I take bad leaves off, I pull up, I take suckers off. So those tweezers, I can't do without tweezers, especially the ones like that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's vigilance if you want a good show plant. It's something you just don't put on there and grab, a week before to go to show and expect to win the best in show or whatever. You need to stay at it. I mean, it's a constant thing to have. And if you've never been to convention, you're going to be amazed at the plants that are entered in that show. Some of them are just magnificent. You think you were doing good, and then I should have
You
left
thought
mine
you
at
had
home.
a real
Yeah,
winner,
I
and you got in the
did.
showroom, and so, there's a lot of other pretty
Yeah.
ones in here, and yours doesn't look so good.
So stay with it. Keep vigilant. Try not to let them get dry, because that will affect them as well.
What about the size of the pot in
That's an
relation?
important thing
the
too.
size of the pot?
You want to have a pot, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
1/3 the leaf spread, and the judges are really watch that. If you had a plant this big and it was in a little bitty pot, they count off points, 3 points for that, and you don't want to lose 3 points. On the other hand, if you have a pot this big and your plant's just a little bit bigger, that's over potted. So you don't want it over potted or under potted. In this club, I always try to help new people when they bring plants in the show.
Yeah.
I helped new people win Best in Show with plants because their plants were underpotted. I recommended they repot the plant. I helped them with grooming stuff, and beat me out for Best of Show many a time that I end up winning second or third, where their plant, because they groomed it before they put it on that table, it ended up winning and beating me. So That's how important grooming is.
You're a good man.
Well, I lost a lot of big awards, but I can remember many times new people, Hector did that, Marjorie did it, I don't know how many different people. I had one best in show, and because the last minute grooming, we helped them with that, and that's how they got their plants to win. I remember a lady had a plant, a great big one, she had a little bitty tiny pot, and we found the pot, so that it could be slipped into there so it could get the right size. One best in show.
Wow.
I think another thing to note on all of this is regardless of whether or not you're showing it, it's just really good for the health of your plant. Like if you want your plants to look awesome at home and be beautiful at home, these are tips to help that happen. So I think
Too big
that's
of a pot is not good for any plant because you can get root rot from that. And too little a pot, sometimes the plants dry out too quickly, and so you may have a problem with it taking up water properly, or if you're wicking, it may dry out.
So any questions on grooming your plants?
Oh, one more thing we forgot to talk about, and you didn't forget it, but in addition to suckers and stuff, when you're grooming, you gotta get if you're gonna disbud for the show. Disbudding means taking off those buds while your plant's growing. And we don't see any buds on those plants because that lady over there took her buds off.
That
She's
one might have a
removing
bud.
those to groom that plant. In addition, and the state show's not till October. So she's grooming those plants now. When you take suckers, you take the blooms off, that plant wants to grow, and the first thing it does is puts those suckers out. And those little suckers take the place of the blooms, and on a regular plant at home, if you have a lot of suckers, you're not gonna get any blooms, and you want the blooms. For show purposes, you gotta make sure you get the blooms off if you're disbudding, and you wanna make sure the suckers come off, because that's gonna misshape your plant. So those two things go hand in hand, and you gotta, just like all the other things that Irene's told us about, and keeping it clean and all that stuff, leaving suckers on there, or leaving buds on there if you have a time before the show. When you remove the buds, you save the energy of the plant and make it go to the foliage. And so your foliage tends to overlap, and that's what you want. You don't want gappy spaces in between the leaves. You want to look from the top and don't see soil. If you see soil, but when you're grooming the plant right, you don't see soil because that plant has been groomed and those leaves are overlapping, and there's very little, I mean teeny little spots. That's been groomed good, and that's what you want.
And there's a whole program that can be given on disbudding and blooming for the show, and we'll do that another time.